The night sky burned with strange colors. Stars shimmered like silver dust, while two moons hung heavy above the alien horizon. The human soldier, Daniel, stood on the edge of a broken ridge, his armor torn and his pulse racing. He had crash-landed here after his ship was destroyed in battle. Alone, wounded, and far from home, he thought his story would end on this unknown world. But fate had other plans. From the shadows of the jungle, a figure appeared, tall and fierce, moving with silent grace. She was unlike any being he had ever seen, her skin glowing faintly under the twin moons, her hair flowing like strands of fire, and her eyes sharp with command. The aliens around her bowed their heads, whispering her name with fear and respect. She was Princess Kilira, heir to the throne of the Vayari Empire. Daniel raised his weapon, but his hand shook. He knew he could not survive if she chose to end him. Yet instead of striking, she stepped closer, studying him with curiosity. Her gaze pierced through the dust, and fear clinging to him. "You are not one of us," she said, her voice steady yet almost soft. "You are fragile, yet you still stand." Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. He had faced warlords, generals, and monsters, but never someone like her. Every instinct told him she was dangerous, yet something in her eyes spoke of more than violence. It was not pity, not contempt, but something else, something Daniel did not expect from an alien princess. Around them, alien soldiers muttered in disbelief. They called him weak, unworthy, a broken thing that should not be standing before royalty. But Kilira silenced them with a single glance. She walked toward Daniel and stopped only a breath away, her height towering over him. Her hand reached out, not for a blade, but to touch the torn insignia on his chest plate. "Human," she whispered, tasting the word like it was forbidden. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to speak, but words failed him. For the first time since the crash, he felt something stir in him. Hope. He had survived not to die alone, but perhaps for this very moment. The alien crowd gasped as Kilira turned to them. Her voice rose, strong and unwavering. "I have chosen," she declared, her words echoing against the cliffs. "This human, broken and scarred, will be my mate." Chaos erupted. Warriors shouted in anger, priests protested, and even Daniel staggered in shock. He could not understand why she would claim him. Was it a trick, a cruel game, or something else entirely? But Kilira's gaze never wavered, and her hand rested on the hilt of her blade as if daring anyone to challenge her. In the shadows above, unseen by the crowd, another figure watched. Tall, regal, and cold as stone, the queen, Kilira's mother, observed with narrowed eyes. Her daughter's words were not just bold, they were dangerous. No one defied the queen's will, and no one brought outsiders into the royal bloodline. Her silence was sharper than any blade. Though she said nothing, her glare promised fire and ruin. Daniel did not yet know the storm he had stepped into. He only knew the weight of Kilira's choice. And in the depth of her alien eyes, he saw both salvation and destruction. The meeting that began under the burning sky would ignite a war not only for survival, but for love. And somewhere in the silence, the queen whispered to herself, "This will not stand. No human will take what belongs to the Vayari throne." Daniel felt his fate tighten around him like a chain. The princess had chosen him, but the queen had already sworn to tear them apart. And in that moment, he understood one truth. His greatest battle had only just begun. The night after Kilira's shocking declaration, the air in the alien fortress was heavy with whispers. Every corridor carried the sound of outrage, disbelief, and fear. The Vayari soldiers spat Daniel's name as if it were poison. Priests of the old temples called it an omen of doom. Even the generals muttered that the princess had shamed the empire by choosing a fragile outsider. Daniel felt the weight of those eyes wherever he walked. His boots echoed against the stone floors, but silence always followed. He was not a guest, not truly, but not a prisoner either. He was something worse, an intruder wrapped in the illusion of respect. And yet, Kilira walked beside him with pride, her chin raised high, daring anyone to challenge her decision. She guided him through the grand halls of the Citadel. Alien fires burned blue in tall braziers. Strange banners fluttered with symbols Daniel could not read. The palace was a place of beauty and danger, carved into the very cliffs as if daring the world to strike it. Every wall spoke of power, of ancient victories, of empires crushed beneath the Veari banner. And now, within these sacred halls, Kilira had chosen something no one expected him. Daniel tried to keep his voice steady when he spoke to her. Why me? You could have any warrior from your own kind, someone strong, someone who understands this world. But Kilira only looked at him with those fierce eyes. They have strength of body. Yes, but you have something they lack, she answered. You stood alone against death itself, and you still did not fall. That is a strength my people have forgotten. Her words unsettled him, but they also lit a fire inside his chest. He had never been called strong before, not like this. He had fought battles, yes, but here in this strange world, he was nothing compared to their towering forms and blades of living fire. And yet Kilira saw him differently. Her belief in him was both comforting and terrifying, but their bond was forbidden. The queen made no move against them yet, but her silence was louder than any threat. Daniel could feel it in the way soldiers stared at him with hate, in the way servants trembled when Kilira touched his hand. The Empire would not allow this union, not without blood. One evening, as the moons climbed high, Daniel followed Kilira into the training arena. It was an open circle of stone surrounded by jagged statues of ancient kings. There, she placed a weapon in his hands, long and curved, alien steel glowing with a faint pulse. You must learn, she said. If you remain weak in their eyes, they will destroy you. They will not wait for my mother's word. Daniel gripped the weapon awkwardly. It felt alive, humming like a heartbeat, but heavy in his human hands. Kilira circled him, her stance graceful, every movement sharp as lightning. Your body is not built like ours. Your bones will break if you fight as we do. You must fight like a human, not like a Veari, she said. And with that, she lunged at him, forcing him to raise the blade. The clash rang through the arena. Sparks flew, his arms trembled, and yet he held his ground. Again and again she struck, testing his reflexes, pushing him past fear. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps, sweat running down his face. Still, he did not let go, and in Kilira's eyes, he saw approval, something no one else here would ever give him. But they were not alone. In the shadows of the arena, unseen figures watched. Spies sent by the queen whispered of the bond growing stronger between her daughter and the human. They returned to their mistress with every detail, and the queen, upon hearing, let her rage simmer in silence. To her, this was not love, it was betrayal. A challenge to her power, to her throne, to the bloodline of her empire. Meanwhile, Daniel began to dream strange dreams. Visions of battles yet to come, of Kilira standing against her own kind. Sometimes he saw himself chained, sometimes crowned, and sometimes lying in blood beneath alien skies. He awoke each time with his chest heavy, his heart pounding. But each morning, Kilira was there, and her presence kept the fear away. Days turned to weeks. Their bond deepened, not only in training, but in quiet moments by the fire. She told him of the ancient wars, of the stars her people conquered. He told her of Earth, of oceans and skies she had never seen. Their worlds were different, but their hearts began to beat in rhythm, and that terrified the Empire more than any weapon. For a human and a princess were never meant to walk side by side. Their very bond was a wound to the queen's pride. And though Kilira stood with strength and defiance, Daniel could not shake the truth. The queen would not remain silent forever, and when her wrath came, it would strike like a storm across the stars. But for now, in those stolen nights and endless days, they stood together, A forbidden bond, fragile yet unbreakable, forged in defiance of an empire. And though Daniel did not yet know it, this bond would soon be tested in ways neither love nor hope alone could survive. The great hall of the citadel was silent as the queen entered. Her footsteps echoed against the marble floor, sharp and unhurried. The crown upon her brow glowed faintly with the light of the moons, casting her face in cold silver. Every soldier and noble lowered their heads, not out of respect alone, but out of fear. For when the queen of the Veyari walked, no one dared to breathe too loudly. At the center of the hall, Kilira stood tall, Daniel by her side. The air between them and the throne was heavy, as if the very stones carried the weight of judgment. The queen's eyes locked on Daniel, piercing and merciless. For a long moment, she said nothing, letting silence burn into the hearts of everyone present. Then her voice cut the air like a blade. You dare bring this creature into my house, and you dare claim him as mate. Kilira's voice rang out, strong and unshaken. Yes, mother, I dare. This human has proven his spirit stronger than any warrior you set before me. He is mine by my choice. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles whispered. Priests clutched their symbols. Daniel felt the weight of countless eyes pressing on him like knives. Yet he stood firm, though his hands trembled behind his back. The queen's lips curved into something colder than a smile. You speak of strength, but all I see is weakness. You defy me with this choice, Kilira, and in doing so you insult the throne itself. Her voice carried across the hall, and even the stone pillars seemed to shake under her words. Daniel's heart raced, but when he looked at Kilira, she stood unyielding, her chin raised. Her defiance lit a fire in him, even as fear clawed at his chest. The queen rose from her throne, her cloak sweeping across the floor like the wings of a shadow. She raised her hand, and in that instant, a circle of guards stepped forward, surrounding Daniel. You call yourself strong, human, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Then prove it before the Empire, before the stars. Show me if you are worthy to even breathe in my daughter's presence. Daniel's throat went dry. What do you mean? He asked, though he already knew. The queen's eyes narrowed. You will face the trials of fire. You will fight. You will bleed. You will crawl before the eyes of my people. If you survive, perhaps you will earn the right to stand at her side. If you fail, your corpse will serve as a lesson to all who dare defy me. The hall erupted in shouts, half in excitement, half in outrage. Some demanded his execution now. Others whispered eagerly about the spectacle. Kilira stepped forward, fury flashing in her eyes. You cannot do this. He is not of our kind. These trials were not made for him. But the queen silenced her with a single gesture. Then he will break, and your foolishness will be ended. The Empire does not bend for love, child. It bends only to power. Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. He was no stranger to danger, but this was something far beyond the wars he knew. Yet even as fear wrapped around him, he saw Kilira's hand tighten into a fist, her eyes burning with fire. She believed in him, even when the entire empire did not. And in that belief, Daniel found his voice. Then I will face your trials, queen, and I will not break. A hush fell over the hall. Even the queen tilted her head slightly, as if surprised by his courage. But her smile did not soften. Very well, she said, her words like iron. The trials begin at dawn. Prepare yourself, human, for when the sun rises, it may be the last time you see its light. That night, the fortress stirred with restless energy. Servants whispered of death. Soldiers laughed cruelly about how quickly the human would fall. Kilira stood with Daniel in the quiet of her chambers, her hands pressed to his shoulders. You should not have accepted, she said, her voice trembling though her face stayed firm. Daniel shook his head. I could not run. If I did, I would have lost you and myself before the fight even began. Kilira's eyes softened, and for a moment, the fierce warrior princess was simply a woman torn between love and duty. She leaned close, her forehead against his. Then survive, Daniel, survive not for them, not for the queen, but for us. And in her voice, he found a strength greater than fear. Far above, in the highest tower, the queen gazed out at the stars. Her hands gripped the rail as she whispered to the night, "No human will steal my daughter from me. He will face the wrath of the Empire, and he will fall. And when he does, Kalira will learn that no heart, not even hers, can stand against the will of a queen." The moons cast their cold light across the citadel. The stage was set, the trials awaited, and in the shadows of the coming dawn, Daniel prepared to step into a storm that could either forge him into legend or destroy him utterly. The first light of dawn spilled across the alien sky, painting the twin moons in shades of gold. The citadel was alive with noise, the great arena filled with thousands of Vaari citizens, their voices rising like thunder. They came not to honor Daniel, but to watch him break. The queen sat high upon her throne of stone, her gaze colder than the stars themselves. Beside her, Kalira stood with clenched fists, her heart beating like a drum of war. Daniel entered the arena through the iron gates, his body heavy with dread, but his spirit burning. He wore no armor save for leather straps and the curved alien blade Kalira had given him. Every step he took was met with jeers and laughter. To the Vaari, he was nothing more than prey sent to slaughter. But he walked forward anyway, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the trials ahead. A horn blared, deep and ancient, and the first trial began. The ground trembled as the gates on the far side opened. From the darkness emerged a beast taller than 3 men, covered in scales that shimmered like obsidian. Its eyes glowed red, its teeth glistened with venom. The crowd roared with approval, chanting for blood. Daniel's hands shook as he raised the blade. He had fought machines, he had fought soldiers, but never a monster like this. The beast charged, its roar shaking the arena walls. Daniel dove aside, rolling across the sand, the creature's claws ripping into the stone where he had stood. The impact rattled his bones, but he forced himself up. He could not afford fear, not now. Kalira shouted from the stands, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Remember, human, do not fight its strength, fight its speed." Her words lit a spark in Daniel's mind. He darted left, then right, forcing the beast to follow. Its massive body was powerful but slow to turn. With each dodge, Daniel's movements grew sharper, his strikes aimed not at killing, but at weakening. Finally, he spotted the exposed joint beneath its scaled leg. With a desperate cry, he drove the blade deep, twisting with all his strength. The beast shrieked, collapsing to one side. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, shocked that the fragile human had landed a blow. Daniel staggered, bleeding from a cut across his arm, but he did not stop. He climbed the creature's back, gripping the ridges of its scales. One final thrust to the neck, and the beast shuddered, collapsing into the dust. Silence turned to chaos. The arena split between fury and awe. Some called for his death anyway. Others began to murmur, perhaps the human was not so weak. Kalira's eyes burned with pride, but the queen's expression did not change. Her voice carried across the arena. "The first trial is complete, but he will not last the second." The gates opened again, and this time, warriors entered. 3 Vaari soldiers clad in black armor, their blades glowing with living fire. They circled Daniel like wolves, their movements precise, trained, merciless. Daniel's breath came heavy, sweat dripping into his eyes. One opponent would be hard enough, but 3. The first warrior struck, his blade arcing through the air. Daniel blocked, the force rattling his arms, sparks flying. The second came from behind, but Daniel dropped low, sand spraying as he rolled away. His body screamed in pain, but he pushed forward, using every ounce of human cunning. He could not match their strength, but he could use their pride. He baited them, forcing them to swing wildly, turning their numbers against them. Step by step, strike by strike, he drove them into each other's path. Finally, as the third warrior lunged, Daniel spun aside, and the blade struck one of his own. In that moment of chaos, Daniel drove his weapon through the gap in the armor, dropping the first soldier to his knees. The crowd gasped again, their voices torn between rage and astonishment. The second warrior pressed harder, fury in his eyes. Their blades clashed again and again, until Daniel's arms nearly gave out. But with a desperate feint, he drove the blade into the sand, kicking it upward. The flash of grit blinded his enemy for an instant. It was enough. Daniel struck, and the second soldier fell. Only one remained, towering above him, rage burning in every strike. The arena shook with their battle, Daniel's strength fading fast. His blade cracked, his breath came in ragged gasps, but still he refused to fall. The final warrior roared, raising his weapon for the killing blow. Daniel dropped low, using the last of his strength to sweep his leg. The warrior crashed into the dust, and Daniel's broken blade found the gap in his chest plate. The arena was silent once more. 3 warriors lay defeated, the beast dead, and yet the humans still stood, swaying but unbroken. Kilira's heart swelled with fierce pride, but the queen's fury was ice cold. Her voice rose above the silence. He has survived 2 trials, but the third will end him. From the far gates, a shadow emerged, larger than the beast, deadlier than the soldiers. The queen's champion, a general who had never been defeated. The crowd erupted with cheers of bloodlust, their voices shaking the very stones. Daniel raised his shattered weapon, his body trembling, and Kilira whispered under her breath, "Survive, Daniel, survive." The trials were not yet over, and the deadliest battle was about to begin. The arena floor was stained with blood and dust. Daniel stood trembling, his chest heaving, his blade cracked and nearly useless. The crowd roared in fury and awe, for the human had survived where many thought he would die. But the queen did not clap, she did not smile. She only raised her hand, and silence fell like a hammer. From the shadows of the gate, the queen's champion stepped forward, a towering figure clad in black armor etched with silver lines, his eyes burning with the fire of countless battles. He was General Veyros, undefeated in 100 wars, a warrior whose name was spoken like thunder across the empire. Every scar on his armor was a tale of victory, and every strike of his blade had ended lives. The crowd rose to their feet, chanting his name, their voices shaking the sky. Daniel's knees nearly buckled, but he forced himself to stand tall. His body was broken, his arms heavy, yet the thought of Kilira watching him kept him from falling. She stood above, her hands gripping the stone rail, her lips moving silently, whispering his name like a prayer. The queen, beside her, leaned forward with eyes sharp as knives. "This ends now," she declared, her voice carrying across the arena. "Human, face the might of my empire and perish." Veyros raised his massive blade, the metal humming with alien energy. It was heavier than anything Daniel could lift, yet the general swung it as if it were air. The first strike came like lightning, Daniel barely leaping aside, the sand exploding where the weapon landed. The shock wave knocked him to the ground, his ears ringing, his bones screaming. The crowd roared with laughter, certain the fight would end within moments. But Daniel crawled back to his feet, his cracked weapon clutched tight. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his eyes burned with stubborn fire. He could not match Veyros in strength, but strength was not his only weapon. He remembered Kilira's words, "Fight like a human, not like a Veyari." And so, he moved differently, and not with power, but with speed, with cunning. Strike after strike came, each one faster, heavier, crushing the ground beneath them. Daniel dodged, rolled, barely surviving by inches. The crowd's laughter began to fade, replaced by murmurs. They had seen prey, but now they saw a man who refused to die. With each dodge, Daniel learned the rhythm of the general's strikes, the slight pause before the blade turned, the weight that slowed him. And in that rhythm, he found an opening. With a desperate cry, Daniel lunged, his broken blade slashing across the joint of the armor. Sparks flew, the cut shallow but enough to slow the general for a heartbeat. The crowd gasped. Kalira's eyes widened with hope, but the queen's face darkened. Varos roared, spinning with fury, his massive hand striking Daniel across the chest. The blow sent him flying across the arena, crashing into the stone wall, his vision blurring. Pain tore through him, his ribs screamed, his breath shallow. For a moment, the world dimmed, and he thought it was over. But then he heard Kalira's voice, loud and desperate, cutting through the roar of the crowd. "Daniel, get up, you are not weak. You are mine, and you'll not fall." Her words struck his heart harder than any blade. With a groan, Daniel dragged himself to his feet, blood dripping from his lip, his legs shaking but unbroken. The crowd grew restless, their voices rising. Some screamed for his death. Others began to cheer his defiance. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. Could this human truly stand against the Empire's greatest general? Varos growled, lowering his stance, his blade glowing with power. "You are stubborn, human, but stubbornness is not strength. This is your end." He charged, his weapon raised high. Daniel steadied himself, his body screaming in pain, his vision narrowing. He knew he had one chance, one final gamble. As the blade came down, Daniel dove forward instead of back. The weapon crashed into the sand behind him, the force shaking the ground. Using the last of his strength, Daniel drove his broken blade upward into the gap of the general's armor beneath the chest plate. The blade pierced deep, sparks bursting as alien energy crackled. Varos froze, his eyes wide with shock, then fell to his knees, his blade slipping from his grasp. The arena went silent. 1,000 eyes watched in disbelief as the great general, undefeated in 100 wars, fell to the ground. Daniel stood above him, swaying, his blade buried in the armor, his body ready to collapse. But he did not fall, not yet. Kalira's cry broke the silence, fierce and proud. She raised her fist high, shouting his name to the skies. The crowd erupted, some in fury, some in awe, their voices a storm of chaos. But the queen did not cheer. Her hands gripped the throne tight, her eyes blazing with hatred. Her general had fallen, but her war was not over. Daniel looked up at her, blood on his lips, his chest heaving. He had survived the breaking point, but he knew the queen's wrath was far from finished. In her silence, he felt the weight of storms yet to come. And in that silence, the battle for Kalira's heart and for the fate of 2 worlds had only just begun. The arena was still echoing with the roar of the crowd when silence fell once more. General Varos, the undefeated champion of the Empire, lay motionless in the dust, his armor cracked, his blade broken beside him. And there stood Daniel, a human covered in blood and bruises, yet still alive. The impossible had happened, and the Empire trembled. Kalira leaned over the rail, her heart pounding with both fear and pride. Her voice rang out across the arena. "He has proven himself. He is my chosen mate." The crowd erupted again, but this time their voices were divided. Some cried for Daniel's honor, shouting his name with respect. Others demanded his death, unable to accept that a fragile outsider had bested their strongest warrior. The queen sat unmoving on her throne, her face a mask of stone. Inside, her fury burned hotter than fire. Her daughter's choice had grown from a foolish defiance into a dangerous spark. The people had seen the human survive. They had seen him bleed, but not break. If she killed him now, some would cheer, but others would rise in rebellion. The queen, ruler of stars, could not allow weakness, but neither could she allow unrest. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough," she commanded, and the arena obeyed. She rose slowly, every movement carrying the weight of her power. Her gaze locked on Daniel, and her words fell heavy. "You have survived my trials, human, but survival does not make you worthy of the throne. My daughter is heir to an empire, and you are still nothing but flesh and bone. Daniel's chest heaved, but he lifted his head, meeting her gaze. I may be nothing to you, Queen, but I am not nothing to her, he said, his voice hoarse but strong. The crowd murmured, shocked by his boldness. Kilira's eyes filled with fire, pride swelling in her chest. But the Queen's face remained cold, her eyes sharp as ice. She turned to her council, to the priests and generals gathered at her side. What say you? She demanded. The high priest stepped forward, his robes glittering with jewels. This union is an insult to the gods, my queen. The human must die before the heavens curse us all. Another general bowed, his voice firm. If you spare him, he becomes a symbol. Already the people whisper, they see courage in him. If you kill him now, they may see only fear. The queen's jaw tightened, her mind racing. To kill him risked rebellion. To spare him risked disgrace. For the first time in decades, the queen felt the weight of a true dilemma. She had ruled with absolute power, her word unchallenged, but now her daughter's love for this human had shaken the foundation of her throne. She looked to Kilira, her voice low and sharp. You force my hand, child. You place your heart above the empire, above your people. Kilira did not flinch. My heart is my strength, mother. And this human has proven himself in ways your warriors have forgotten. He is not weakness, he is truth. The words spread like fire through the arena. The people murmured, torn between tradition and the shocking power of defiance. The queen saw it, the cracks forming in her control. She could not kill Daniel openly. Not now, not without risking the loyalty of her people. But neither could she accept him as her daughter's mate. Her voice rose, regal and final. The human lives, but not as my equal. He will never sit beside my daughter on the throne. If Kilira chooses him still, she chooses exile, she will lose her crown, her title, her place among the stars. Gasps filled the arena. Kilira's eyes widened, but she stood firm. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the choice crashing down upon them both. Exile meant freedom, but it also meant leaving behind her people, her power, her destiny. It meant giving up everything she had been raised to be. The queen leaned back on her throne, her lips curling into a cold smile. Choose wisely, daughter, for this choice will shape not only your life, but the fate of our empire. Kilira turned to Daniel, her hand reaching toward him, her eyes fierce yet uncertain. Daniel met her gaze, blood still dripping from his wounds, but strength burning in his heart. He knew what her mother was doing, forcing her to break, to choose between him and her world. And yet, in that moment, he also knew one truth. The queen had underestimated the power of love and the strength it gave them both. The arena held its breath, every voice silenced. Would Kilira bow to her mother's will, or would she defy the throne itself? The queen's dilemma had become her daughter's, and the choice would decide not only their bond, but the future of two worlds. The arena was silent, holding its breath. Kilira stood at the center, her hand reaching for Daniel, her mother's decree still echoing across the stones. Exile or throne, love or empire. The choice weighed heavy on her, but her heart beat with a strength greater than fear. The queen leaned forward, her voice sharp as steel. Well, daughter, speak. Will you cast aside this foolish creature, or will you betray your bloodline and walk away from everything you were born to rule? The crowd stirred, whispers flying like sparks in the wind. Some begged her to stay loyal. Others murmured in awe at her courage. All waited for her answer. Daniel, bloodied but unbroken, stepped closer. His voice was hoarse, but it carried through the arena. Kilira, you owe me nothing. If you choose your people, I will understand. But know this, I did not fight for a throne. I fought for you, and whatever path you take, I will walk it with you, even if it leads into exile, even if it leads into war. Kilira's eyes burned, her choice clear. She turned to the queen, her voice steady and fierce. Then hear me, mother. I choose him. I choose the human you try to break. I choose love, not fear. I choose a future not built on chains, but on hope." The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in thunderous approval. Cries of her name filled the air, but so did cries of betrayal. The Empire itself seemed to split in that moment, torn between tradition and change. The Queen's face darkened, her knuckles white upon the arms of her throne. Her voice boomed like thunder. "Then you are no daughter of mine. You are stripped of your crown, your name, your place in this empire. You will leave this city as nothing, and when the stars swallow you, do not call upon me." Kilira did not flinch. She stepped down from the platform, her hand finding Daniel's, their fingers locking tight. Together they stood before the entire empire, defying the Queen's wrath with nothing but their bond. Daniel's chest rose with pride, his wounds aching but his spirit unbroken. He whispered to her, low but firm, "We're not nothing, Kilira. We are stronger than they know." The people shouted louder, some falling to their knees in respect, others spitting in rage. But no one could deny what they had seen. The human had survived the trials, defeated the general, and won the heart of the princess. And now, together, they had defied the throne itself. The Queen rose, her cloak sweeping around her like fire. Her eyes glowed with fury, her voice sharp with venom. "You think this is victory, but it is only the beginning. You will find no peace, no safety. I will see the stars turn against you. And when you fall, the galaxy will remember you not as lovers, but as traitors." Kilira lifted her chin, her voice ringing clear. "No, Mother, when the galaxy remembers us, it will remember that even in the face of power, we did not bow. That is what true strength is. That is what you have forgotten." The crowd trembled with her words. For the first time in generations, someone had spoken against the Queen, not with fear, but with truth. And though her power still hung heavy over the empire, her grip had cracked. The people had seen defiance, they had seen courage, they had seen love stand against the throne. Daniel and Kilira turned, walking hand in hand toward the gates. Every step was heavy with danger, yet every step was also free. They had lost a crown, but gained something greater, a destiny not written by the Queen, but by themselves. Behind them, the Queen's eyes burned with a storm yet to come. She would not forgive, she would not forget. Her vengeance would stretch across the stars. But in that moment, Daniel and Kilira did not care. They had chosen each other, and that choice was their victory. The gates opened wide, the horizon beyond glowing with the rising sun. The crowd's voices still echoed, some cursing, some praising, some weeping. And as the two walked into the light, their silhouettes strong against the dawn, a new chapter began. The story of a human and an alien princess who defied an empire. A story that would burn across the galaxy as legend. A story not of weakness, but of love's unshakable power. And though the Queen vowed to tear them apart, they walked forward unafraid. For together, they had claimed not just survival, but destiny.